welcome to another Comic Book Poser YouTube video. I am Dustin Remy, the Comic Book Poser, and today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I have not been able to update anything on the website in the last 48 hours as I've been transferring the control of the domain across two different Weebly accounts so I could add a little bit more bells and whistles to the website. But I have been reading quite a bit, and we'll see which one I like better, writing reviews or talking about comics, and maybe this will let me slowly, kick off my ring rust as hopefully soon I get to do another episode of the Chops Comics podcast over at Chops Comics here in Lawrence, Kansas. So today I'm going to talk about a couple of the trades or larger books that I've read over the past couple of days, and then in true fashion to my excitement for unboxing videos, I got to go visit my guy Jason over at Chops today. That there were some things that I'm running low on reading material, and he more than loved to offer to put together another small package of books of his selection for me. And instead of shipping and waiting for it to bounce around town, we just did a curbside pickup where I got to stand and talk through his shop's door to him, because I think that's the most human contact we've had with people that we're not related to in a long time. So the first book I want to talk about is Justice League Dark. After reading the first three trade volumes of Capullo and Snyder's Batman and the Flashpoint event that set up the New 52 run, a lot of people had been suggesting to me to read more of the New 52, and I forgot that I purchased Justice League Dark over a couple months ago. So I figured this was no time better than the present to jump in and read it. So this first volume, In the Dark, is written by Peter Milligan and art by Michael Janin. And when I picked up a Justice League title, right, I was expecting to see more of the Justice League characters that I were familiar with. And, looking at the cast of characters who make it on front of the cover, right, I very much realized that something has to happen to the Justice League. So in the first book of this, you see that a couple different of our heroes are kind of jumping around, setting up their time in the storyline. So we get to see what's up with Deadman, Constantine, Madame Xanadu, Shade, Mind Warp, and eventually the Enchantress. So early on, we discover that the Enchantress is trapped in some kind of pocket universe in this envelope in some kind of dumpy, lonely farmstead where nobody could find her. Yet what you find through going through this is that something is torturing the Enchantress, and you can't figure out what is causing her pain or insanity. You don't know if she's going to flip out and cause something bad to happen, but it connects a bunch of random events that happen before we meet the Enchantress to kind of this bout with her sanity. For example, the first page of dialogue or monologue is Madame Xanadu talking about how she sees something bad coming in her tarot cards. We meet Junie Moon, who becomes a very significant character throughout the storyline, that maybe she's being chased by a devil. Maybe there are a bunch of them that have rained from the sky. So there are a bunch of authentic Junie Moons and some fake Junie Moons. and we discover that, I think my favorite random two events that show up during some of this enchantress linked insanity is a shower of books in a dead language start raining from the sky, and kill people, or the odd one, on two farms, cows give birth to mechanical meat slicers. So all kinds of wild things are going down. And in order to help deal with this problem, uh, Batman dispatches Cyborg, Superman, and Lois Lane to go take on the Enchantress. And when they get there, it starts a storm of teeth and bones that all Superman can talk about is how gross they smell. And in that um, series of events, we learn that Superman, Wonder Woman, and Cyborg are all lost to this tooth storm. We then see some more dialogue between Zatanna, who becomes another big driver of the story, and Batman, that Batman is going to go take care of the problem after the first three were taken down, and Zatanna uses her powers to stop Batman, and she makes the argument that like society would fall to its knees with the loss of Batman. So we eventually see a meeting between Shade and Madame Xanadu, where Xanadu charges Shade and the powers of his magical vest to be able to kind of pinpoint onto people's physical location and open gateways for them to assemble a new team to come together to stop the Enchantress's madness. And, through this book, we kind of get elements of a Dirty Dozen kind of team building to it. Not that, all six of these, or Dirty Half Dozen, that all of these people are bad and corrupt, but it's got that same kind of awkward team building feel that a lot of those, Dirty Dozen models have. And even some of the characters that have well established relationships, like the Dove and Deadman, um, they start or end up on thin ice during this process, because we meet the Deadman by him trying to seduce the Dove in while possessing another man's body, and she is just creeped out by that and not having it. So eventually what happens through the first two books is that Junie Moon ends up at the Deadman and Dove's home or apartment, and she is seeking out the Deadman because she knows that she's being chased by someone. The Deadman has no idea who it is, so the Deadman possesses Junie to see if there's anybody lurking around in her head, has this awkward conversation with Dove as he is possessing Junie's body, and Dove kind of storms out. We slowly start to see everybody come together, and it's by the end of book 3 where they start kind of devising a plan to try and fight the madness. And one of the things that you discover is odd about Junie Moon is that she was removed from the Enchantress's mind, that Junie Moon is someone who was possessed by the Enchantress and helped kind of keep her sane, was the yin to her yang. And the Deadman takes a big sympathetic liking to Junie Moon, and there's, a lash out between he and Constantine about the whether or not they return Junie Moon to the Enchantress. Constantine, you learn, has picked up some new spells because when he was sleeping with, I think it was Madame Xanadu. No, it was when he was sleeping with Xena, that he picked up some of her spells and is using backwards magic. The last two books kind of end in this big epic battle against the Enchantress, and the last book of this first volume uh, plays with the notion of whether or not the team who split up at the end of their first battle or their battle with the Enchantress, whether or not they should stay together. And spoiler alert, they don't. So the last book kind of plays with what was Madame Xanadu really seeing, what are the repercussions of the new kind of mostly magically powered Justice League um, need to fend with or be able to fight against to stay together. Um, I think I like this trade enough to at least pick up the second volume. That unlike Batman, the first, even the first volume, the Court of Owls, that was easy for me to pick up with little to no kind of knowledge of what was going on in the universe. This one was a struggle a little bit at the beginning for me because, I know who John Constantine is. I know a little bit about Deadman, but the rest of the characters were um, fairly difficult for me to uh, feel a level of interest in them. I also think that at least from the artistic point of view, like the art in this book is very spot on in terms of doing all of the mythical themes, the crumbling of the world, the chaos of the Enchantress's spells. But at times I got Madame Xanadu and Xena confused. Even though Madame Xanadu is wearing like that small gem on her head, those two characters look so similar in the face to me, and have similar elements of powers that they use, that I I struggled a little bit kind of keeping those two apart. But like I said, I was intrigued enough by the story in the book to probably pick up the second volume when my LCS opens up again for real. And then we'll see if I go from there. And if any of you watching this have read the first 6 issues of Justice League Dark and then read beyond that, and you have firm thoughts either way, please, please, please let me know. And if it's $15 worth spending, I'll do it. And if you think I have $15 that I can better throw away on another title, then let me know that too. The next two books that I picked up are more in my comfort zone. The first is Captain America Forever Allies, and the second one is Captain America Allies and Enemies. So, Captain America Forever Allies takes place in the point in time when Bucky Barnes is wearing the mantle of Captain America, and this trade is not a single collection of like a Captain America run. That it is, what's in here? Let's see. Um, Young Allies Comics 70th Anniversary Special #1. It is 1 through 4, I think. I gotta read the tiny print on this one. One through 4 of Captain America Forever Allies, and then the last one at the back that I was really really impressed to see, and kind of excited to see, is the 6 chapters of the original Young Allies book from the 40s. So what's happening is, you learn that Bucky is struggling with his lack of connection to his peers because he, like Captain America or like Steve Rogers, went through this point in time where he lived in some suspended animation, and is way, way younger than his counterparts. So the Young Allies 70th anniversary book shows the story of how some of the Young Allies came together, and the Young Allies were five people. It's Bucky Barnes. It is Toro, the Human Torch's sidekick, and then there are four other guys that Bucky met literally at a rally for young people during the First World War. That he meets these guys and they automatically gel, and it's Patrick O'Toole, Washington Jones, and then two more whose names escape me, but were all part of the eventual team that comes together. So the first book does this kind of nice storytelling of how Bucky learns that one of the two surviving, or one of the other three surviving members of the Young Allies is on his deathbed, and that one of them the other one is visiting him in the hospital. So Bucky goes to meet them, and they're like, "Holy shit, you're very young. What happened? You're not Captain America, or you're not Bucky." And they start kind of talking some of the stories of the exploits of their younger days, and it ends with one of the man who is on his deathbed dying. There's this beautiful toast moment over a bottle of brandy that they all expected to share together at the end of World War One, but their paths didn't cross very much after that. And they're all memorialized on a plaque in Arlington together. So Cap shows up and kind of pours the last of the bottle out for everybody in front of the tombstone. The next bit of the Young Allies series is you see that Bucky, Captain America, has discovered that one of the Young Allies' biggest rivals is somehow still alive, and he spots her at Wash's funeral, which was the last surviving member of the Young Allies other than Bucky. And he starts to seek her out, and this book jumps back and forth in time from their interactions with her in the 40s to his hunt for her now. And you learn that they're seeking out Lady Lotus, who has strong telepathic abilities and can use her powers to possess people and puppet them. In the 40s, she discovers a gem that was brought to her by the Japanese, and the gem essentially increases the reach of her powers. And she's trying to find a second one. And if she finds the second gem, it makes her an unstoppable being, because in the next to last book, you find that these gems are remnants of the Celestials and the Eternals that have left them there on Earth. And this book is kind of this good, kick-ass back and forth through time story of how she was able to use her power, the interaction that she had with the Young Allies, and Captain America on the chase against her now. In terms of this, the 6 issues of the Young Allies in the back, first, it's nice to, see good old-fashioned, Jack Kirby art. Part of me really wants to see if I can find a version of this actual Young Allies run on the cheap, because part of me feels like it's sin when it's not on kind of the lovely old comic smell of newsprint. But it was nice to be able to read this. It was nice to kind of get the original story as kind of the palate cleanser at the end of the book. The other book that was a collection of Captain America stories is a collection of several different one-shot Captain America stories that kind of introduces, as the title aptly puts it, allies and enemies. So there's a story about the Falcon. There's a story about the First 13. Then there's a story that focuses on Crossbones, not really the interaction between Captain America and Crossbones, but it attempts to kind of humanize Crossbones or show some ethics to him. There's one on the Secret Avengers, which is essentially Black Widow and Carol fighting against another secret assassin school. And then the last one is Captain America versus Batroc, and that one is explicitly like Batroc was hired to help some freelance arms dealers, and he only took the job because he wants to fight Captain America. There's this weird little like parkour through line in there, and it's all about, does Batroc get to restore his ego or maintain his ego in a world where he can defeat Captain America? So if you like Captain America at all and you just want to read more for some of the like lore based, canon, then this was a relatively good read. The next three books, I got one of these randomly in the like lot of random trade and prestige books that I picked up on eBay, and then I found the other two from New Directions Comics in Pennsylvania. And I finally read this, and these are just 3 individual issues of a small story run from, I think this is the one from 1991, where you learn that Captain America is 1992. Captain America is fighting some illegal gun runners that he runs into. The DEA steps in, or ATF steps in, and takes the guns away and says, "Well, we'll take care of this." The Punisher is in a similar kind of fighting a drug cartel kind of story, and what happens in this one is that he's with like an American diplomat who then gets assassinated, and ultimately what you learn at the end of book 1 is that Captain America is being listed as the prime suspect for the person who is gun running or who is supplying both guns and drugs illegally. But what you discover is that it's the Attorney General with a real strong arm for foreign policy, who's attempting to create relationships with like a Noriega style dictator to sell them weapons to sell weapons and exchange guns so they can kind of get profit, and the Attorney General can use the puppet dictator as a puppet to create more democracy throughout Latin America. In the last 2 books is really where you see Punisher and Captain America come together and figure out how to fight together as a team. And the one thing that I'll note at the end of this first book is that the Punisher is hired to assassinate Captain America, and the last couple of panels that we see is him shooting Captain America saying, "Let me die," and the secretary of the Attorney General kind of brushing her hair back and being excited that they took out their biggest threat. The last 2 books are this weird kind of 2 people who both operate under the same common like ends, right? Both Captain America and Frank Castle are very heavily invested in kind of this sense of justice, right? That they want people to pay for their crimes, but where they have different means to that, right? Or a slightly different interpretation of justice, where Captain America will, give you an ass whooping and then turn you over to the authorities to be dealt with, whereas Castle's Punisher is, judge, jury, and executioner. And you see throughout their relationship, Captain America brings a sense of kind of defense over offense to the Punisher at times, and you see the Punisher bring a little bit of ruthlessness to Captain America. That there were a couple of panels in the third book where you see like this bloodthirsty expression from Captain America that I've never really seen before, right? This big sense of desperation and a little bit of this notion of retribution. So in the last book, it's how do the Punisher and Captain America come together to take down both the puppet dictator and the Attorney General. I thought this was a good read. In searching for this collection of books, I've seen all three of them packaged together at around $8 to $12. So if you are a Captain America fan or a Punisher fan, then I think this is it's definitely a pretty good read. The last kind of three things that I'll talk about, and then I'll save one of these to write about. Moon Girl, which I picked up from my comics for, or what was it, Creators for Comics auction from the Lion's Den. This was a fantastic read, and I think I'm probably going to write about that because I think I've been rambling for quite some time. So the last three books that I'll talk about, one of them is another Punisher title. Punisher Bloodlines is a single issue of a Punisher drug cartel story. This is from 1991, and essentially you see Frank Castle attempting to save the son of a drug kingpin who's trying to flee the influence of his father. I think I would have liked this book more if I had not read it right after I finished the Captain America Punisher. But I'm also aware, right, stories like this were hella topical at the end of the late 80s, early 90s, because, the United States was doing a lot in the war on drugs and trying to take down Latin American dictators. The next one that I read was Gardner Reborn. This is something else that I also got from one of those random lots on eBay. This is book 1 of 3, and this was an interesting kind of entry point to old Green Lantern to me, because I don't, the longest exposure I've had to Green Lantern was reading Black Core, the kind of run that came out between season 1 and season 2. And then I think I watched Ryan Reynolds in the Green Lantern like twice. So Green Lantern has never been someone that I've been wholly interested in, but this book, it came in, it's the number 1, and I read it. So what you are seeing early in this book is a battle between Guy Gardner and I can't remember the villain's name. But there's a big old fight at the beginning, and something happens at the end of this where Guy Gardner loses a fight and gives his ring to someone else, and that means he instantly loses his powers, right? He's not necessarily a working part of the Lantern Corps anymore, and his position with the Justice League is probably in question because sure, he's a smart strategic mind, but he now offers no tactical power because he's not the Green Lantern anymore. So this becomes a weird, like, Guy Gardner rebranded kind of thing where it almost feels like Guy Gardner becomes a different version of the Punisher named the fucking Gardner, which is odd and hilarious to me, to see that like his new ID is to be this big ripped dude just armed to the teeth, with a bunch of different weapons. So yeah, that's really what happens in this one, and he attempts to kind of find his way, to stay connected to the Lantern Corps, and he um, starts having like these weird dreams that end up getting him kicked out of this truck that he's hitchhiking in. Somehow he ends up riding in a Green Lantern dog's Green Lantern like fire hydrant. So yeah, this one was fucking wild. But where I might want to pick up the next issue, is that it's, you know, Guy Gardner taking on Lobo, who's a villain that I've always been a little intrigued by, but never did a whole lot of reading on. And then the last book that I read is a single issue of a book called The Draft. This came out in 1988, and it essentially becomes the military is trying to create their own drafted core of superhumans, mutants, like a little bit of everything. And it's about all of these different people coming together. The main character of the book, who I think it's Night Mask, eventually finds a way into the fucking White House and blows up next to the president. Which was kind of odd to me, because in this kind of little last essay that is continued from the introduction to the book, on page 1, you learn that the president survived someone who can blow up, literally blowing up right next to him, which means he thinks that he discovered that the president is also some kind of mutant, some kind of superpower, superhero, something. But this was a fun read, and really, aside from, you know, these stories being a little hit or miss with me, what I really liked with the Punisher Captain America stuff, the Guy Gardner book, the Punisher standalone, and the Draft, is I fucking love comics on newsprint, right? They still have that good old musty newsprint kind of smell to them, and that's something that, you know, that's like new car smell to me. It's something that's intoxicating and makes me want to do more. And really, I think the only publisher that I've seen that does newsprint comics on any kind of regular scale today, is Alterna. And I've picked up a couple of Alterna books. I definitely think they're really cool, and I think, you know, they're almost newsprint comics for late 80s, early 90s newsprint comic prices, which is nice. But I can't find them all the time. All right. So, like I said at the beginning of this, I went to swing by Chops today because Jason was in the store, and much like he gave me 0 bad recommendations in my last random compilation of trades that I got from him, I'm going to look and see what he gave me today. I know I cheated a little bit more on this run than I did the last one, because he wanted me to make sure there wasn't anything that I already had. And I think I almost got another copy of Dark Arc #1 and the new Berserker trade, or Berserker Unbound, but I've got all 3 of the Dark Arc trades. I had the singles for Berserker Unbound, and even though I'm very much team buy the single, buy the trade, I asked Jason the question if there was anything in those books that kind of blew some wind up my skirt or made it worth buying it in trade, and he said, actually no. So in terms of what I've got here in front of me, I've got a good collection of books that other people have recommended to me, or I've seen some hype about. So after finishing Superman, Red Sun, and letting Jason know how much I enjoyed it and writing that blog post on it, he said, "Boy, do I have another Mark Millar run for you." So the first thing that I've got to read for this week is Mark Millar and Simone Bianchi working together on Sharky the Bounty Hunter. So this is something that Jason said it's something that he likes, and it's something that you would like if you like Miller. It's an image book, and it's branded with Netflix on the back, so I'm wondering if there's some kind of Sharky the Bounty Hunter something in the works, or it already exists and it's just been off my radar. But this is my first new thing to read. We've already, talked 1,000 times about how much I'm a big fan of Colin Bunn. That, there's nothing that I've read of his that I didn't like. That I was a big fan of Unholy Grail, of Dark Ark, of his work on Unearthed Now. I think the only other big title of his that I haven't read is Harrow County. So Bone Parish, if I like it as much as I have everything else Cullen Bunn, then I'm probably going to update my trade paperback review of Damn, That's a Whole Lot of Bun with a little bit more bun in it. The next book, all I know is a lot of people have told me I should read this. It's the first collection of DC Vertigo's 100 Bullets. That, there is probably some justifiable hype there on the front because it won 6 Eisner Awards. But I know there are a lot of people who have read this and kind of feel the way that I felt about like Mr. Miracle, that this should be one of those must-read kind of titles for just about anybody. So I'm excited about this one, and this also looks like it's 20 books, so 1 through 19. So I don't know if there's more in this than that, but I like that I'm going to have a longer collection to read physically instead of digitally. I've been reading a lot of the Hickman image stuff that was up on Humble Bundle a couple weeks ago, and while it's nice to be able to see some stunning art in, on my wife's iPad Pro that she bought for work, that's nice, but I miss having a damn book in my hand, or I feel my mind is wandering more reading something digitally than when I'm physically holding something in front of my face. Next one, we got some Warren Ellis coming our way, a Vertigo book, Transmetropolitan Back on the Street. I don't know anything about this. This feels like a trade that is written on newsprint, and it is. Oh yeah, death to glossy photos. And it even has some of that newsprinty smell. So even if I hate the story in this, which again, if Jason recommended it to me, I'm very sure I will not. I'll just love it for having a big paperback collection. 3 more, and if you already haven't stopped the video by now, 3 more, I'll let you go. The next one is Hit Girl in Canada. The other person who I have been a huge fan of is Jeff Lemire, that everything that he does, it blows my mind. I fucking loved Sentient that I picked up from TKO. I am way into just the batshit craziness that's going on in Family Tree. And then, anything that I've picked up of his, I've not hated. So I think I'm going to like this. Hit Girl in Canada. This is a collection. It's books 5 through 8 of the Hit Girl series. So if I like what's going on in Canada, then I, will probably pick up the first book that collects 1 through 4, and we'll see how I feel from there. The next to last book is Marvel Knights 20th anniversary or 20th edition. This to me is I'm going to like it because it's a collection of characters that I just like watching how they run together anyway. Right? I've written about almost all of Zdarsky's Daredevil books that are featuring him and Elektra helping him get his groove back. There are a lot of people, I think Blake, who I follow on Twitter, just finished Brubaker's run on Daredevil and has told me that I need to go check that out as well. So I'm going to like reading a book that is Black Panther, Punisher, Elektra, and Daredevil together. And then the last one that I've got here in my stack is something else that everybody told me I should read if I want to start getting into Batman more. And this is the 30th anniversary edition of Frank Miller's Batman the Dark Knight. The way that Jason described this to me when he was switching one of those other titles I had out, he said this book is responsible for saving Batman from the campiness of the Adam West show era and making the modern Batman that we feel a connection to today. So I'm excited to write about these. The last thing, I think you may have seen in my last couple of videos, that the only shirts I've been wearing are things from my random collection of comic book store shirts or hero shirts. I told Jason I needed a new shirt, so Chops in lovely Lawrence, Kansas is in the town of KU. So now I can rep two things that I love at the same time, buying things from Jason's shop while looking like I'm running around in the crimson and blue when I, can cheer for KU sports ball if we have sports ball again physically all together. So that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed listening to me talk about books that I've read instead of the last part of this being most of my other videos of me going, this is a book, I don't know anything about it, and people only watch like 5 minutes of it. So we'll see if you enjoyed any of the takes on some of the older books that I've read. Please, if you liked it or want to give me some constructive feedback on how to not ramble as much on some of these books that I've picked up, please comment on it. If you didn't hate it, throw me a like, hit that sub button so I can have more than like 9 followers on YouTube. But that's it. The last thing that I will tell you is, if you've been to my website at all, like I said at the start of this, I am updating some things on the website with a little bit more bells and whistles now. So we'll see if I can blast out a new and improved comicbookposer.com 2.0. All right. Thanks for stopping by. Have a good one.